Right now, we have another speaker who's here with us, and he's going to be in the studio right here, right now. Let me tell you a little about him. Mubariz Siddiqui is the general counsel at Sarmayakar, and it's Pakistan's leading venture capital firm, where he heads all transactional and structuring matters. And as a legal practitioner, he has extensive experience working with tech startups, VCs, and angel investors in Pakistan. And Mubariz also guides early-stage companies on products in regulated spaces through the applicable framework. He has been practicing law since 2008. So lots to learn over here, so stay with us, and I'm going to welcome him right about now in the studio.
Hello everyone, my name is Mubariz Siddiqui. I'm a lawyer that has been practicing in this space for the past 6 years. Over this period of time, I've had a great experience meeting a lot of influential and actually innovative and driven founders, investors, ecosystem builders like the team at the Nest itself, and even regulators. Today, I'm here to talk about how regulation and policy can foster innovation in Pakistan. Consider this as a 15-minute crash course, which will take you through all the regulatory updates that have happened recently and what needs to be done in order to foster innovation in Pakistan. One of the biggest reasons why regulation is primarily important is because of the current framework, which entirely focuses on incentivizing a regulatory more of a rent-seeking behavior, which obviously needs to change in order for Pakistan to move forward. When we talk about our North Star, what we have been doing over the past few decades is creating a market that rewards rent-seeking behavior, that rewards rent-seeking behavior, and that goes on to create a market which essentially leads to investors who have been investing capital in non-performing assets such as real estate, and investors who do not invest in people. Now, a great policy, a great mental model for me to understand policy and its impacts is this quote by Charlie Munger, which says, "Show me the incentive, and I'll show you the outcome." Now, when we try to map regulation across incentives and outcomes, what we come to is really understanding how we can achieve a market that is innovative, that supports startups, and that is conducive for growth. What we actually want to achieve, our North Star, is a market that rewards innovation, that rewards risk takers, that rewards people who want to build things. What we also really need to do is create a market that discourages rent seeking, that discourages investment in assets that do not yield growth and productivity. Now, before we go on about how innovation can be enabled and rewarded, what we need to understand is when we talk about innovation, what is exactly that is being discussed. Innovation is different from invention. It does not have to be something that is absolutely novel, that hasn't existed before. Innovation is actually a slow, gradual process. It takes time. Innovation is not limited to a particular form. It can take many different forms. There could be innovative business models. There could be innovative products. There could be innovative service deliveries. There could even be innovative execution, where things are being done in a way that weren't done before. Now, in order to lead to a market that fosters, encourages, enables innovation, what we need are three principles. The three principles that can guide us and help us achieve that. Principle number one is freedom. Matt Ridley, in his latest book, How Innovation Works, calls innovation the child of freedom. He goes on to observe that innovation is the main ingredient in the secret sauce. The main ingredient in the secret sauce of innovation is freedom. Now, there are two types of freedom that we need to understand well, and have regulation based on in accordance with. The first one is freedom to. When we talk about freedom to, we are talking about freedom to exchange, experiment, imagine, invest, and even fail. Now, regulation that enables us to have the freedom to do these things is enabling regulation that allows that number one is conducive for innovation, is conducive for allowing people to try new things, and it is also very kind on failure. Now, one example that jumps to my mind across this, or as an example of a free enabling regulation, is the sandbox that was recently released by the SECP. Now, SECP was in a position where it had a restrictive regime around different financial services that you could offer, which it was regulating, but they were still restrictive and archaic. It also bears a burden of a great responsibility to make sure that consumers who are buying these financial services and products are protected. Now, in order to balance both the need for innovative businesses and models and services and protecting the customers, they introduced the SECP regulatory sandbox. What the sandbox does is it allows the SECP to take on and incubate of sorts new businesses or new innovative founders who can then test out their products and services in a contained environment. Within that contained environment, SECP also gets a chance to learn more about how these businesses need to be regulated. The successful businesses are then graduated, and then the law around how they will be regulated is framed accordingly. This not only enables the founders to move fast, this also enables them to try things that have never been tried in Pakistan before, and to work in a safe, contained environment. Now, when we talk about freedom from, Matt Ridley says freedom from expropriation or restriction by chiefs, priests, and thieves. His words, not mine. But what we're essentially talking about is a situation where our knee-jerk reaction goes on and bans things. Now, I'm sure we're all familiar with the term Banistan, and we've seen it many times. What we need freedom from are arbitrary bans, or arbitrary decision-making by regulators. The example that comes to mind is PTA and the recently introduced online harm rules. What that's doing is when PTA goes on and bans games like PUBG, where on the basis of more and more young people using it, and hence not being able to focus on other things in life, what it's doing is it's creating an unnecessarily and unclear regulatory environment which does not serve to give a clear picture of what can be done and what cannot be done in Pakistan. What we actually need is people who will regulation that will not only restrict the regulator from taking arbitrary measures, but what we also need regulation that is clear, that is easy to understand, and that is easy to comply with. Now, investment in people is still very new in Pakistan. Pakistan historically has not seen people invest in people. In Pakistan, because of the current incentive structure, which incentivizes rent really, has seen people invest in assets. Those assets that are primarily real estate or primarily a different currency or gold, which is not, that capital tied to those assets is not yielding any productive results or does not yield a productive output. What we need is investment in the risk takers, people who will go on and build new things, build bigger things that would just create value for all the stakeholders involved. Now, how do we encourage investment in people? There are three different principles that we need to think about. So principle number one is a conducive investment climate. A conducive investment climate, for that to understand, what we need to understand is how investors think. Investors think in terms of risk. Risk determines how capital is allocated. Risk determines the profile of return of that capital. And I think one of the best models to understand how investors think about risk is the onion theory of risk by Mark Andreessen. Mark Andreessen is the founder of A16Z, a leading global venture capital firm. The onion theory of risk says that each early stage business is restricted or is like an onion which has layers and layers of risk attached to it. As the business grows, each layer gets peeled off and the business gets de-risked. Amongst these layers are country risk, market risk, regulatory risk, financing risk, and the sort. Now, given that each business needs a system to thrive in, for innovative businesses that have not existed in a market like Pakistan before. Besides the system, they also need smart and patient capital. For patient capital to come into Pakistan, it needs the regulatory comfort and the regulatory certainty and the policy that works for it. Now, what is the policy that works? To give you a good example of what has been recently done is the State Bank of Pakistan has recently revised its rules and guidelines around how foreign investors can take money outside of Pakistan, take capital outside of Pakistan after the investment works out, and how they can divest that. Now, this is a policy that is encouraging. This is a policy that creates a conducive environment and gives the foreign investors the comfort to invest more money in Pakistan. Now, even though they have taken the right steps, which are quite encouraging, a lot still needs to be done around how founders can leverage different structures to raise more smart capital from across the world. Besides policy that works, what is also really required in Pakistan is more effort on effective dispute resolution. We still, as a nation, do not have faith in how disputes can be resolved. The dispute resolution mechanism, even right now, doesn't work for most people. It only works for a small limited audience or limited people in Pakistan with the means. Now, moving beyond policy, what we also need is procedure that works for everyone. Right now, it is much harder to run a documented and a registered business in Pakistan than it is to run an undocumented one. And when you incentivize undocumented businesses, the outcome is an economy that is largely undocumented. Now, regardless of moving beyond the founders and the people who are starting business in Pakistan, what is also important to understand is that it is still extremely painful to invest in Pakistan. Despite all the new measures and all taken by the policymakers such as the SECP, SBP, what is still missing are people who can design effective processes. The government seems to be obsessed with this one window operation, but what needs to be understood is that one window is a means to an end. It's not the end. The end or the outcome that we desire is still a superior customer experience, user experience for whoever wants to comply with the law. What we need is our principles like ask for information only once. If I have provided my information to SECP or SBP once, I should not have to do it again to any other regulator. And that is what needs to happen behind the scenes, where all regulators are talking to each other, all regulators are coordinating with each other, and can process information much faster. That can only come if we can empathize with the users or with the people who have to comply and design effective processes. Third thing that is very, very important is signaling. We need to be very good at marketing Pakistan as an investment destination. The right signals are investor and innovation friendly. Like SECP, SBP policies that we spoke about, they both talk about how they both signal the right things, that it's investor friendly and it's innovation friendly. The wrong signals are currently being sent by the PTA, which is an complete focus on how Pakistan should ban anything and everything it does not understand or does not even care to understand. Now, moving on, the third aspect that we need is a push, is an impetus to adopt innovation, innovative and new services, products and services. Now, given that Pakistan is largely undocumented economy, digitization is documentation. Now, that should not be used as an excuse to go and over-regulate or make it harder for digital businesses to exist or to operate in Pakistan. However, there needs to be an incentive to transact digitally. There's a restaurant in Karachi, which is in a somewhat remote but posh area. They do not have a POS machine where you can pay by credit card or debit card, but they do have an ATM machine where you can take out cash and pay them, right? Now, the right to pay digitally is perhaps one of the most important rights that can be afforded to the Pakistani citizens. It's very simple. What that means is that a person who is transacting above a certain amount, either from a store, from a professional, from a service provider, or from any vendor, should have the right to pay for those services or products by digital means. And all such vendors and professionals, doctors, lawyers, dentists, should be obligated to have the system where they can accept payment digitally. Lastly, what we need is to incentivize ambition. We need to incentivize the risk takers, the people who will go on and build these innovative businesses, people who will not be sitting there and trying to make rent or a small thing. There are people who will go on and take that leap of faith and try to build something that actually adds, that creates value. So here's a call to action. If you're a part of an industry or a small, like small or big, and you are facing regulatory issues, please organize and advocate. There are a lot of low-hanging fruits. There are a lot of small things that are making it difficult for businesses in your industries to progress, to do things, and to operate. What you need is to organize and to first understand what exactly it is that you will change and what impact that will have. You will need to solve for a large number of people within your industry. Two lessons that I've learned after engaging with various regulators recently from an industry perspective are the regulators are usually nice guys. Now, I know this is contrary to public opinion, but they usually want to help. What you need to do is empathize with the regulators, understand why their position or why these regulatory hurdles exist in the first place. You need to then explain to them what it is that you're trying to achieve and how it will help the greater number within your industry. And you can then go on and engage with them. What I can share with you is that a lot of regulators now want to engage and help people generally. So with that, I would be signing out, and my hope for you is that you will take ownership of the regulatory hurdles or the regulatory restrictions in Pakistan and try to do something about it. Thank you.